Hello, welcome to Conscious Conversations. My name's Luke McLean. What am I? I'm a meditation teacher and I'm a life coach, and I'm just in the midst of creating this really cool business called Holistic Growth, where I work with people at a personal level, but also work with teams at a cultural level on how to bring the whole person. So how to bring the whole person in a performance state, because one of the things, with 10 years of working with corporates or working with a large global organization and working in the wellness, mindfulness and leadership space, is that the really successful teams I've worked with have created cultures where the whole person can show up. And so many businesses and so many people feel that they can't bring their whole self to work. People can't bring their whole self to certain relationships, and for whatever reason. And when we can unlock that, when we can really create safe spaces for people to show up and be them authentically, that's sort of the magic space where performance happens, where creativity happens, where innovation happens, because there's the environments of incubation of growth. But to do that, we need certain things. We need certain practices and behaviors and sort of cornerstones of culture and of ourselves, of the inner work, to do that. So, I'm really excited about the new venture, Holistic Growth, and in the next month to 2 months we'll be talking more about it. So that's what I've been up to, and I'm really excited for that. This episode is a really great one. It's with Cory, Cochiolo. I hope I got that right, Cory. But this is just a chat about a person who's been on a spiritual path for a long time, and they've been on that path in many different ways, from sort of meditation to yoga to now plant-based nutrition, and just her want or her feeling of service to others, to help others on their journey. And she does it in what seemingly in the conversation for me is in just such a natural way, where she sort of props herself up in a studio, and yoga studio, and people come and see her for a variety of reasons, stress and anxiety and wellness issues. But she just, in the conversation, you'll understand and hear, Cory, that she's just got this really beautiful natural energy. And I think this is something that I've learned in what I'm doing, is it's less about the surface level, and it's more about the inner level of people, of just that you'll have the conversation and you'll make the judgment, and you'll get the feeling of the experience with the person, not how they look, or not necessarily what's on their Instagram or on their socials, but it's the contact, it's the connection that we get with other people, which forms our experiences, which then dictates our beliefs and our outcomes. And I think that's really important. And you can just see the intrigue and natural energy of Cory in this conversation, which I really loved. So I really hope you like it. And that you get something from this today, because that's the whole purpose of Conscious Conversations. So without further ado, this is Cory, Cochiolo, which I hope I got that right again, Cory, and enjoy. Really take care of yourself. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Reading a little bit about what you've done, and obviously meditation is an important part of your offerings, but there's an element of coaching there, there's hypnotherapy, and there's some sort of deeper spiritual work that you sort of do. So I'd love to sort of get an idea of how you present that to people as an offering.
Well, currently now my life looks very different from what it did 10 years ago, but right now I have my personal practice in a yoga studio. So I wasn't a yoga teacher until recently. That was another venture I just did this year. I became a yoga teacher just for myself, really. But yeah, so I have my office in a yoga studio, and I've been in that place since 2011. And I work with clients on a daily basis on all sorts of different topics. So it's very, you could say people can come in for addictions, but they also can come in because they have health issues. Sometimes it's just depression, or it's life purpose. It can be a number of different things. And I work in my practice, tends to be mostly adults, but I also work with teenagers and I work with smaller, younger children as well. So my day-to-day work, my work job, my paying job, is very interesting and I love it. It's like the best thing in the world. But then I also have a YouTube channel where I started it back in 2012 because I thought then at the time I was in a place where I was very much into gaining information in my own spiritual practice by channeling different information from, this sounds a little bit weird, but by channeling information from different guides and angels or whoever it was that I was working with at the time in a school, my hypnotherapy school where I learned to become a hypnotherapist also had lots of other things going on. So we were part of a World Healer conference group where we put on World Healer conferences every year, and different people of from different spiritual connections would come and do talks and different demonstrations and all sorts of stuff. It was really, really wonderful. And we got to travel to India and go to different places doing that. So not only was I at the time a hypnotherapist when I belonged to that school, but I think it's on my bio, I was teaching hypnotherapy as well. And I was also the executive director at the school because my mentor, by the time I finished all my training, was getting quite old and he just wanted to write his books. He was 87 at the time. He wanted to just be an author and kind of hand over the reins of the school and running it and everything else to me. So I had an interesting time in that place from 2004 all the way up to 2011. Wow. So that was like my 2004 was the very first introduction I got to anything to do with spirituality. I was not spiritual. I wasn't psychic. I wasn't religious or anything. So back in 2004, I was in a really bad place in my life where I moved from Virginia to San Diego. And my husband's in the Navy, so he traveled all the time. And at the time, we had two small girls. I think they were like 3 and 5 years old. Yeah. And I was really, really unhappy. I think I had really bad postpartum depression that was never diagnosed. And I had rheumatoid arthritis, and they thought I had fibromyalgia, and I was just falling apart. I had asthma. I had all these different health issues. And a good friend that I had at the time also moved to San Diego because her husband was in the military. So she knew of a place here in San Diego that was called the Institute of Thought, which is where I eventually took my hypnotherapy training. But at the time, it was having once a week meetings called the Soul Group. And it was just a bunch of like eclectic people that would come in and talk about their spiritual experiences or Jesus or aliens. It was really interesting and bizarre. And I was like, these people are crazy. but I never left.
And Cory, I think, how do you decide, or how was the decision making for you to get onto that path? Obviously there was a challenge that sort of enough pain to move you towards some sort of change. But now that you're sort of on that journey, what dictates you to go into meditation, into yoga, sort of moving out of hypnotherapy? Like, how does that progress for you these days?
Well, it was a long journey, and I think because of the journey, it's like anyone on a journey. When you're going through different experiences and you're reading books and you're doing trainings and you're learning, and you start to become interested in spirituality or start to be a seeker of some kind, then it's almost like, I'm sure this has probably happened for you too, but it's almost like you intuitively kind of get led from one thing to the next, don't you think?
Yeah, I do, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like without you realizing, your life puts things in front of you and you're like, okay, now I'm interested in Buddhism, or okay, now I'm interested in my diet and health. Or so it was just like that for me. It was like one thing basically led to another. When I found yoga, the interesting thing about the yoga community is that most people find yoga and then find spirituality. It's like they go to yoga for the physical exercise and that side of it first, but then once you're in the yoga world, it's very hard to not connect to your breath and not get pulled into the spiritual aspect of what yoga's all about. Whereas I was the other way. I was already very spiritual, and yoga was the other off. Yoga was like my body now, and my food and my diet, and becoming more conscious of my human self rather than just my spiritual self.
And that's an interesting observation, Cory, to have that little bit of a flip, because predominantly, especially in modern society, we're very body focused on how we look and how we move, and that's the yoga part. Then we transition more to the spiritual, where you are more starting at the spiritual and then wanting to then reconnect more with breath and body and discover that, which is, it is a little bit of a flip. I'd be interested to look at how that's grown you, like how the connection, has there been a lot of growth in the last couple of years from the discovery of yoga and the reconnection to the body? Because I'd imagine that early on in life you had a connection to the body through play, and you probably did things that were exercise and movement related, but now you've sort of built another layer of connection to that.
Well, yeah, I think what I did, because when I found and discovered meditation and spirituality back in 2004, I tried my hardest to disassociate from my body.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I was so ill.
Yep.
So all of my work was going into finding and discovering ways of how can I use meditation to heal myself? How can I use the light or the spiritual, Christ light, whatever, to heal my body and stop taking all these drugs and stop doing everything that everybody's telling me to do and do what my heart and my intuition is saying, which is heal yourself in a different way. So I really focused on going into my mind, going into my spirit, to my soul, to heal my body. And I eventually ran away from my body and got to a place on my spiritual journey. And again, I think this is something really critical that we don't ever talk about, is that I got on my spiritual journey and I realized that I would rather be in a state of meditation. I'd rather be on that inner world than live my real life.
Yep.
And I don't think people really talk about that very much. You can get to a point where it's easy to just disconnect from humans, especially with everything that's going on the planet. It's very easy to say, I don't like people. People are awful. There's so much violence in the world. There's so much bad stuff in the world. I just want to go to my rose garden in my mind, in my visualization, and just not deal with humanity,
Yeah. And how?
And that's what I did.
And there's, Cory, there's a few trains of thought too around, there's the Buddhism train of thought that you are not your body. So there's an element of not attaching to the physical self, because it'll bring, pain and suffering because of that attachment. But then there's obviously, this is the body that we've got, and there's a need to connect with it, to ground ourselves with it. And also, personally, I think there's an element to try to use the body we've got to get the most out of it that we can possibly do, so we can live this life on this planet as fulfilled and meaningful as we can. And the body will play a part in that, if we like it or not.
I totally agree with you. I think the body is everything now. I didn't back then. I've changed very much so, my mindset and my feelings. Your body is just this delicious thing that we have this lifetime around to experience everything through senses and feelings and emotions and all of that stuff. So, I didn't realize how important my diet was on my journey. Back in the day, I drank and I smoked and I ate lots of meat and just really didn't care about what I was putting into my vessel, so to speak. And then just the discovery, like through yoga and through my body and movement, and becoming more aware of every single feeling inside of my body, connected to meditation, like that feeling. I know when you sit down and you get quiet and you really start to meditate and let go of the world around you, you can really become aware of everything that's happening in your body. The slightest little sensation and twitch and things like that. And I noticed how, at that point, how